Elymas is the heir to the Edvon family, and today is finally the day he is going to undergo the ritual of divine blessing. But ever since he was little, whenever he saw or learned something new, he would get a strange feeling of déjà vu, as though he had experienced it somewhere before, almost like he had played a game with the exact same plot before. But no matter how much he thought about it, he could never figure out why. As he is about to begin the ritual, his father notices that he seems a little nervous, so he tells him not to worry and to simply have faith in the god of the sword. The priest then begins chanting the incantation for the ritual, and as Elymas listens to the words, the strange feeling of déjà vu suddenly becomes stronger than ever before. All at once, countless memories begin flooding into his mind, and he finally realizes that it was never déjà vu at all. In his previous life, he was an ordinary man who obsessively played an online VR game called Magic World, and this world is exactly the same as the one from that game. Upon realizing that, Elymas can hardly contain his excitement, because he knows practically everything there is to know about this world's classes, skills, monsters, dungeons, hidden quests, and powerful equipment. With all of that knowledge, he is certain that his future is guaranteed to be filled with happiness and success, and more than anything, he hopes to receive his favorite class, Heavy Knight, which was widely considered the most broken class in the entire game. It had a rough start compared to most classes, but once it was fully built, there were very few classes in the game that could hope to compete with it. Once the ritual is complete, Elymas quickly checks his status, and he is overjoyed to find that he really did receive the Heavy Knight class. Unable to contain his excitement, he immediately rushes over to tell his father the good news, but instead of congratulating him, his father looks deeply outraged and disappointed. Elymas is completely shocked by his reaction, and after thinking about it for a moment, he realizes that he accidentally mixed up his memories from the game with this world's common sense. Back in the game, Heavy Knight was one of the strongest classes if the player knew how to build it properly, but in this world, people only judge classes based on their starting abilities. Simple and powerful classes are praised from the very beginning, while technical classes that require years of training before revealing their true potential are regarded as worthless trash. Panicking, Elymas tries to lie about what class he received, but his father forcefully grabs his wrist and checks his status himself. The moment he sees the Heavy Knight class and its unimpressive starting stats, his expression turns furious. Elymas hurriedly tries to explain some of the class's strengths and future potential, but his father refuses to listen. His hand tightens around Elymas's wrist like a vice before he suddenly strikes him across the face. The impact sends Elymas crashing onto the stone floor as pain shoots through his body. His father coldly says that he wasted the divine blessing and is only relieved that the ritual wasn't held in public, because it would have brought great disgrace upon the Edvon family. Before anything else can happen, footsteps suddenly echo throughout the hallway as someone enters the room. It turns out to be Malice, the daughter of the Edvon branch family, and Elymas recognizes her because when they were children, she and Elymas used to play together quite often, but as they grew older, the difference in their status caused them to drift apart, and they haven't spoken to each other in the last 5 years. Elymas immediately gets a bad feeling about this when he sees her, but there is nothing he can do but stand by and watch. Malice requests to undergo the divine blessing as well, and the priest hesitates since the ritual was only prepared for Elymas, but Elymas's father interrupts him and orders him to continue. Once the ritual is complete, Malice checks her status and discovers that she received the Master Swordsman class, the most sought-after class in the kingdom. She flashes Elymas a smug grin, clearly enjoying the fact that she received a class considered far superior to his. And Elymas's heart sinks because the daughter of a branch family obtaining Master Swordsman, while the main heir only received Heavy Knight, is exactly the sort of thing that would humiliate his father and make his mood worse. However, he underestimated just how quickly his father could switch gears, because instead of becoming even angrier, his father begins showering Malice with praise while completely ignoring Elymas, and before long, he proudly announces that from this day onward, Malice will become his daughter and the new heir to the Edvon family. Hearing those words causes Elymas's heart to sink, because if Malice becomes the new heir, then where does that leave him? Malice is really living up to her name here because she continues mocking him, saying she always believed he lacked what it took to shoulder the burden of becoming the Edvon family's heir. Elymas stands there in complete disbelief as his father coldly stares at him before officially deciding to banish him from the family and declaring that he is no longer his son. He calls him a disappointment and orders him to leave the mansion immediately. And Elymas desperately tries one last time to earn his father's acknowledgement by promising that he will one day bring honor to the family, but his father cuts him off and tells him that this humiliation is exactly what he deserves. He warns Elymas never to use the Edvon family name again, saying that if he ever does, he will personally have him executed. Elymas stands there completely shaken as the surrounding nobles silently side with his father and leave him all alone. Before following behind Elymas's father, Malice gives him one final mocking grin. Later that very day, Elymas is thrown out of the mansion with nothing more than a small pouch containing a few coins to help him survive. As he walks away through the pouring rain, Malice watches him silently from one of the mansion's windows, clearly enjoying the fact that she stole Elymas's position in the family. Sometime later, Elymas arrives in Rondome, a bustling city filled with adventurers hoping to make names for themselves. Elymas's situation is pretty bad right now, and while staying in a small inn, he spends his time brooding over the betrayal, humiliation, and suffering his father put him through over a class. Even so, he never once loses faith in the Heavy Knight class because he knows better than anyone just how overpowered it can become. After calming himself down, he begins comparing the world around him with the memories of the game and quickly realizes that while the classes, skills, and monsters are exactly the same, much of the world's history, geography, and even its cities are completely different. Since he can't rely entirely on his memories anymore, he decides that he will have to carefully research this world as he travels. Before anything else, though, he wants to test his abilities for himself because he'd be in real trouble if the Heavy Knight class wasn't the same as what he remembered in the game. But fortunately, after checking his skill tree, he is relieved to discover that none of the Heavy Knight's skills have changed from the game. There are 3 main ways to invest the 5 skill points you receive at the start, and it's not an exaggeration to say this decision can make or break your career. There's Path of the Heavy Armor, Defense Booster, and Beginner Swordsmanship. Path of the Heavy Armor is considered the weakest of all the Heavy Knight skills in this world because of how limited its applications are. Defense Booster doesn't do much other than grant the user increased defense stats, and Beginner Swordsmanship just lets you use sword skills early on. Most people who got the Heavy Knight class would choose Beginner Swordsmanship, and sure, it has its pros, but having played through this class before, Elymas knows exactly which skill tree grants the best rewards in the long run. He knows that almost nobody ever sticks with Path of the Heavy Armor long enough to discover its true value, and that is exactly why so few people realize how absurdly powerful it eventually becomes. So without hesitation, he invests all of his available skill points into Oath of the Heavy Armor. As he does this, he can immediately feel the effects of the skill tree on his body, and he also gains the skill Rampart Reflection, which is exactly what he needs right now. He then purchases the equipment he will need to begin his journey as a Heavy Knight and sets out into the forest to start his first battle. As he walks through the peaceful scenery, the beautiful surroundings manage to take his mind off everything that happened with his father, if only for a little while, but eventually, he comes across a frog monster hiding in the trees called Arana. The frog leaps at him, so he activates Rampart Reflection, and as the frog slams into his shield, it is blown back and killed on the spot. Rampart Reflection allows Elymas to deal damage equal to his defense to all targets that strike his shield, and although it doesn't work on all types of enemies, against a weak opponent, it's an instant kill. He collects the magic stone from the frog's corpse, and even though it's not worth much, he decides to hold onto it in case he needs it later. Just as the battle was over, he suddenly hears someone screaming for help somewhere deeper in the forest, so without wasting any time, he rushes toward the sound and finds an adventurer surrounded by monsters. The man is shocked that Elymas would actually come to help and immediately asks if he can really handle that many monsters, wondering whether he is some famous adventurer despite how young he looks. Elymas quickly denies that and casually reveals that this is actually his very first time leveling up. The adventurer immediately blurts out that he's hopeless and says there is no way a complete beginner could defeat so many monsters. However, Elymas isn't bothered by his warning because he already understands exactly how these starter monsters behave. Rampart Reflection isn't an unbeatable skill, but as long as the user's defense is high enough, it becomes incredibly powerful. So much so that even against a horde of monsters like this, Elymas has nothing to fear. The adventurer desperately tells Elymas to run away, but Elymas calmly activates Rampart Reflection once again, and as the frogs slam into his shield one after another, the adventurer is left shocked as they all die one after another. He has never seen someone defeat this many Rana all by themselves, so he asks Elymas who he is. Elymas is about to give him his full name, but then he remembers what his father said about never using the family name again, and quite frankly, he doesn't want to have anything to do with that family either. So he simply introduces himself as Elymas, the Heavy Knight. The system suddenly announces that Elymas has leveled up. Hearing that, he immediately opens his status screen to check his updated stats. As he looks through them, he is pleased to see that both his attack and defense have increased by 5 points. It is not a massive boost, but it is enough to make him feel that all of his hard work is finally starting to pay off. Just then, The adventurer Elemis rescued earlier walks over to him and introduces himself as Aris. Aris explains that he came from a small, remote village and left home to chase his dream of becoming an adventurer. However, Elemis has no interest in hearing his sad backstory. Before Aris can continue, Elemis simply turns around and starts walking away. Even so, Aris follows after him and continues trying to thank him for saving his life. Elemis tells him not to worry about it because he did not help him expecting anything in return. The only thing he asks for is permission to keep the magic stones dropped by the monsters they defeated. Aris has no problem with that and immediately agrees, saying they belong to Elemis anyway. As they continue walking, Aris suggests that the two of them should form a party once they get back to town. He assumes Elemis has probably been having a difficult time because the Heavy Knight class has such a terrible reputation among adventurers. Most people see it as a weak and useless class, so they usually avoid recruiting Heavy Knights into their parties. Aris tries to encourage him by saying that, once everyone sees what Elemis is capable of, people will quickly change their minds. He believes Elemis will have no trouble finding a party if he simply gives others the chance to see his true abilities. Despite the offer, Elemis refuses without hesitation. Deep down, he knows Arus is not wrong. The Heavy Knight class performs best when fighting alongside teammates because its main purpose is to protect allies and absorb enemy attacks. However, there is one major problem with that approach. If he joins a party, he will have to split the experience points he earns with everyone else. Since he wants to level up as quickly as possible, sharing experience would only slow down his progress. Elemis has already made up his mind. He is determined to prove that a Heavy Knight can become one of the strongest classes without depending on anyone else. Because of that goal, he knows he cannot afford to waste time or slow down his growth. As the two continue making their way back toward town, Aris keeps talking the entire journey. He repeatedly tells Elemis that he will never reach a high level if he spends all his time hunting weak Rana monsters by himself. According to Aris, there is no future in grinding low-level monsters forever. While Aris continues talking, Elemis suddenly comes to an abrupt stop. A strange feeling washes over him, making him realize that something is secretly watching them. He slowly turns around and carefully scans the surrounding area, trying to figure out where the presence is coming from. Without any warning, a giant spider monster suddenly leaps out from its hiding place. The enormous creature lands in front of them, blocking their path and making it clear that it has no intention of letting them leave without a fight. Elemis immediately activates his appraisal skill to examine the monster. After checking its information, he quickly realizes that the creature's level is nearly twice as high as his own. The difference in strength is so large that this battle could easily become a life-or-death situation. The moment Aris sees the giant spider, he nearly wets his pants in fear. Meanwhile, instead of giving in to fear, Elemis stays calm and immediately starts thinking of a strategy that might allow them to survive. As he studies the monster more carefully, Elemis discovers that it was hiding by using a skill called Creepy Crawly, allowing it to completely conceal its presence until the perfect moment to attack. He also notices that the spider possesses several other dangerous abilities, including Slow Poison, which can gradually weaken its target, and Flaming Claw, a powerful attack capable of dealing devastating damage if it lands. Elemis quickly realizes that his Rampart Reflection skill will not be very useful against this monster. The skill only reflects an attack if his defense is at least as high as the strength of the attack he receives. Since the spider is much stronger than he is, trying to rely on that skill right now would be completely useless. Seeing how dangerous the situation has become, Aris starts blaming himself for leading them into trouble. Even though he is shaking with fear, he gathers the courage to step forward and tells Elemis to run while he stays behind to hold the monster off. Elemis can clearly see that Aris is terrified and barely able to stand, so he calmly walks past him and tells him to leave the fight to him. Without wasting another second, Elemis opens his status screen and decides to invest every single one of his remaining stat points into the Oath of the Heavy Armor skill. As soon as he pours all of his points into it, the skill evolves and unlocks a brand new ability called Disarm. This new skill temporarily lowers an enemy's attack stat by 20% for exactly 1 minute every time it successfully lands. Realizing this might be his only chance, Elemis charges straight at the spider. He knows this is an extremely risky battle where one mistake could get him killed, but those are exactly the kinds of fights that excite him the most. The battle begins immediately, and despite the huge gap in levels, Elemis manages to hold his own against the giant spider for a short time. Even so, he knows he cannot keep defending forever because the monster is still much stronger than he is. Suddenly, the spider summons a magic circle and then fires a poisonous beam directly at him. Instead of dodging, Elemis intentionally lets the attack hit him, causing Aris to panic because he thinks Elemis has just thrown his life away. However, that was part of Elemis's plan all along. The instant the spider lowers its guard, Elemis rushes forward and strikes it with his newly acquired disarm skill. Although the attack itself barely leaves a scratch on the monster, Elemis knows the important part is that the skill has taken effect. The spider's attack has now been reduced by 20%. Angry that its attack failed, the spider immediately activates its Flaming Claw skill and sends the attack right at Elemis. A massive explosion erupts the moment the attack lands, filling the entire area with smoke and debris. Watching from a distance, Aris is convinced that no one could possibly survive an attack like that. Just as he begins to lose hope, Elemis calmly walks out of the smoke without a single serious injury. Before the spider can react, Elemis rushes in once again and lands another successful disarm strike. The effects stack together, now reducing the spider's attack by a total of 40%. Seeing the dramatic drop in the monster's strength, Elemis cannot help but smile. For the first time since the battle began, he realizes that he actually has a real chance of winning. Furious that its prey is still standing, the giant spider lets out a loud screech before charging forward for one final attack. It throws everything it has into one desperate strike, hoping to finish Elemis once and for all. But at the very last second, Elemis activates his Rampart Reflection skill. Now that the spider's attack has been weakened enough, the conditions for the skill are finally met. The monster's own attack is reflected back at it with tremendous force, dealing enough damage to knock the giant spider to the ground and completely turn the battle in Elemis's favor. Elemis slowly walks over to the giant spider as it lies on the ground, its body still twitching from the damage it just received. Without giving it any chance to recover, he raises his weapon and delivers the final blow, killing the monster once and for all. The moment the spider dies, his system immediately lights up with several notifications. It announces that Elemis has successfully reached level 12, earned 4 additional skill points, and unlocks several brand new skills as a reward for leveling up. Before Elemis even has time to process everything, Aris runs over to him in complete disbelief. He cannot believe that Elemis actually managed to defeat a monster that was nearly twice his level all by himself. Seeing everything with his own eyes completely changes Aris's opinion. He finally realizes that Elemis probably does not need a party after all and is more than capable of becoming stronger on his own. Unfortunately, the battle is not completely over for Elemis. The poison from the spider's earlier attack finally begins taking effect, causing his body to weaken with every passing second. Seeing his condition, Aris does everything he can to support him and safely escorts him back to town before the poison gets any worse. Once they finally arrive, the two part ways, and Elemis heads straight home to get some much-needed rest after such an exhausting battle. Though his nap is far from peaceful, as he is still haunted by nightmares of the day he was banished from the royal palace. The following morning, Elemis heads to the Adventurers Guild to officially register as an adventurer. The moment he walks through the front doors, almost everyone inside turns their attention toward him. At first, they are impressed by how impressive and intimidating his armor looks. However, the moment Elemis reveals that his class is Heavy Knight, their opinions immediately change. They begin looking down on him, calling his class useless and dismissing him without giving him a chance to prove himself. Unlike the others, the receptionist treats Elemis with respect. She calmly processes his registration, acknowledges his class without judging him, and approves his guild card. Elemis is genuinely happy because, despite everyone's opinions, he has finally become an official adventurer. However, he quickly learns that he will be starting at the lowest rank, F rank. Thanks to his knowledge from the game, he knows that adventurers below E rank are not allowed to participate in dungeon expeditions unless there is at least one E rank adventurer in the party. On top of that, his current rank also limits the number of skill points he can invest into his Oath of the Heavy Armor skill. After hearing all of this, Elemis realizes that reaching E rank as quickly as possible has now become one of his highest priorities. Hoping to speed up his progress, Elemis asks whether there are any parties looking for new members. Trying not to discourage him, the receptionist politely explains that parties usually have very little demand for defensive classes like Heavy Knights, so it may take some time before someone accepts him. Even though she tries to soften the explanation, the real reason is obvious. Most adventurers simply look down on low-level Heavy Knights and refuse to believe they can contribute anything useful. The atmosphere inside the guild changes completely when Elemis places a large pile of magic stones on the counter and asks to exchange them for rewards. Everyone nearby immediately turns to look, unable to believe what they are seeing. They begin whispering among themselves, convinced that there is no way a level 12 Heavy Knight could have collected that many monster cores honestly. Some even accuse him of cheating because they find it simply unbelievable. Ignoring their accusations, Elemis excitedly asks the receptionist if there are any promotion quests currently available that could help him rank up faster. She shyly tells him that there are indeed a few quests he can take if he is interested. Later that night, the scene shifts to a dark cemetery where several experienced adventurers have gathered together. They are all there because they intend to participate in a special raid quest that has attracted a great deal of attention. As everyone prepares for the mission, the man leading the group suddenly singles Elymas out after hearing that he is only a level 12 heavy knight. Looking down on him, he tells Elymas that a dangerous raid like this is no place for an inexperienced rookie. He also refuses to believe the rumors that Elymas defeated the giant spider by himself. Convinced that Elymas has been lying to make himself look stronger than he really is, the man declares that he is going to teach him a lesson for spreading false stories. Elymas is in a cemetery with a group of adventurers when one of them suddenly speaks up and announces that he heard a clown had joined the raid quest. Gaotan immediately tells everyone that the clown is Elymas, and he warns him that there are plenty of newbies like him who underestimate guilds and monsters. Gaotan points out the fact that Elymas supposedly killed an Ariandype at level 12 and calls the whole story a lie. He tells Elymas that adventuring isn't that easy and promises to teach him a lesson. Elymas thinks the whole situation sucks because he can't afford to miss this raid quest, since raid quests are a rare chance to earn a promotion. So rather than argue, he decides to tell Gaotan that he looks forward to working with him. Gaotan admits he doesn't like Elymas, but says he will accept it for now. Without wasting any more time, Gaotan tells Teal to start searching the area. Teal unsheathes his sword, spins it a couple of times, and activates a skill called Search. Search is a rare detection skill that allows the user to sense nearby creatures, and it is especially uncommon among low-level adventurers. After a few moments, Teal reports that there is a horde of roughly 30 monsters nearby. Gaotan praises him for doing a good job, and Teal immediately takes the opportunity to boast about how exceptional his skill is. He even says that he hopes Gaotan will reward him with a promotion to rank E after today's raid. Teal then turns his attention toward Elymas and tells him that his strange behavior at the guild has sparked all kinds of rumors. He says it would have been impressive if even half of those rumors were true, but unfortunately, Elymas ended up with a defective class. Teal proudly explains that he is a red mage, a class with high physical ability that can also learn offensive magic, healing spells, and a wide variety of support magic. Elymas thanks him for his concern but calmly replies that he is perfectly happy with his own class and has no complaints about it. Teal simply tells him not to slow the rest of the team down before walking away. Elymas watches him leave and thinks to himself that the Heavy Knight class is simply more difficult to understand. At first glance, it doesn't seem nearly as flashy as other classes, and in the game, Heavy Knights were often overlooked because they focused on defense and positioning rather than overwhelming damage. However, this world isn't the game anymore. Naturally, most people gravitate toward classes that are easier to use and produce immediate results, so very few people ever bother to master the more technical classes. Soon afterward, Gaotan gathers everyone together to explain the plan. According to the guild report, the undead horde they are about to fight is led by a ghoul head. Since he is a rank D adventurer, Gaotan decides that he alone will fight the ghoul head while everyone else keeps their distance and deals with the weaker undead. One of the rookies nervously asks whether Gaotan will protect them if things become dangerous, but Gaotan coldly replies that he has no intention of protecting anyone who gets caught in his fight. His answer shocks nearly everyone present. Most of them had assumed they could simply stand behind a high-ranking adventurer and earn an easy promotion, only to discover that Gaotan has no interest in babysitting them. The ghoul head is around level 30. Although it possesses no offensive combat skills, it can use Hades' Breath, a skill that transforms nearby corpses into low-level zombies. Under normal circumstances, the raid should still succeed because they have Gaotan, a level 40 rank D adventurer. If everything goes according to plan, victory should be guaranteed. Unfortunately, the party is filled with inexperienced adventurers who expected the raid to be easy, while their leader has no intention of looking after them. Elymas estimates that everyone's survival odds are around 80%. That might sound like a comfortable success rate in a game, but this isn't a game anymore. In this world, death isn't just a temporary setback. If someone dies here, there are no respawns. Unable to ignore the problem any longer, Elymas walks over to Gaotan and politely suggests that he should give the team more specific instructions. Gaotan asks him to repeat himself, clearly irritated. Elymas explains that the guild report might not be completely accurate, and if they wait until something unexpected happens, it will already be too late to respond. Gaotan becomes visibly annoyed and asks whether Elymas seriously thinks he has the right to order him around. Elymas immediately shakes his head and says no. He explains that he is simply anxious because he and the others are low-level adventurers with very little experience. Bowing respectfully, he tells Gaotan that while this may be routine work for a veteran like him, the rest of the team would greatly appreciate more detailed instructions. Gaotan reluctantly agrees, saying that although he isn't anyone's babysitter, he'll explain things a little more clearly. Before Gaotan can continue, Teal suddenly interrupts him and mocks Elymas, saying that only someone with a defective class would be afraid of a few weak undead. He laughs and says he never expected Elymas to run crying to Gotan right before the battle started. Teal confidently tells Gotan that they don't need any instructions at all, and that cowards should simply stay in the back if they're too scared to fight. At that exact moment, the ground begins to shake. Rotting hands burst through the dirt as undead start crawling out of the graves in every direction. The adventurers freeze in fear as dozens of monsters slowly surround the cemetery, but Elymas calmly draws his sword while Gaotan grips his own weapon and prepares to charge. Moments later, the ghoul head finally appears. The enormous undead lets out a horrifying roar, and Teal immediately collapses onto the ground in terror. Gaotan angrily asks Teal what he thinks he's doing before ordering both Teal and Paul to clear a path for him. Meanwhile, Elymas turns toward the rest of the group and tells them to focus on the ghoul head's followers. The adventurers stare at him in disbelief and ask whether he seriously expects them to charge into an entire horde of undead. They thought Gaotan would wipe them out himself while they watched from safety. Since Gaotan is completely focused on the boss, Elymas finally understands why everyone is hesitating. None of them have ever fought a monster horde before, so their fear is completely understandable. Instead of forcing them to charge recklessly, Elymas tells them to split into teams of 3, because, as long as they protect each other's backs, the undead won't be able to surround them. His calm explanation gives everyone just enough confidence to move, but they still have no clue what to do, so they ask what he plans to do. Elymas calmly replies that he will draw the undead toward himself on the front line, and buy everyone enough time to organize themselves. The others immediately protest, saying that although he seems experienced at dealing with hordes, trying to hold them off alone is far too dangerous. They point out that no one can heal quickly enough to survive that kind of pressure. Before anyone can stop him, one undead suddenly sneaks up behind a frightened adventurer. Elymas instantly rushes forward and activates Parry, using his shield to perfectly deflect the monster's attack before creating an opening with a single movement. 2 more undead immediately rush the group, but Elymas intercepts them as well, parrying each attack before disarming both monsters in rapid succession. As even more undead begin pouring toward them, Elymas activates Rampart Reflection, turning the monster's attacks back against them while effortlessly maintaining the front line. The adventurers are left speechless after watching him wipe out several undead in only a few moments. Elymas calmly tells them not to worry because attracting large groups of enemies is exactly what a heavy knight is supposed to do. He also reminds everyone that if anything unexpected happens, they should immediately warn the others instead of trying to handle it alone. As they watch Elymas effortlessly control most of the battlefield by himself, several of them begin wondering whether he is really just an ordinary heavy knight. A notification suddenly appears before Elymas telling him that he has reached level 16, and Elymas smiles to himself because Parry is proving even more effective than he expected. Fighting large numbers of enemies around this level is an incredibly efficient way to gain experience, and after quickly checking his status, he sees that his stats are steadily increasing. Meanwhile, the rest of the group begins working together much more effectively, supporting one another exactly as Elymas instructed. Some of them quietly wonder whether they should simply stay behind him since he is by far the most dependable person on the battlefield, although several admit that he is starting to scare them even more than the undead themselves. As the battle continues, a few adventurers ask Elymas whether they should help Gaotan fight the ghoul head, but Elymas immediately tells them to stay back because the boss is far above their level. Gaotan should be able to defeat it on his own. At that moment, the ghoul head suddenly leaps toward Gaotan and swings one of its massive claws. Gaotan deflects the attack but is forced backward by the impact, and the ghoul head immediately follows up with another strike, but Gaotan counters with a powerful slash that sends the monster crashing into a nearby building. Before it can recover, he rushes forward and lands another devastating blow to its face, launching it straight through a gravestone. Gaotan pauses for a brief moment to catch his breath, but to his frustration, the ghoul head slowly sits back up and lets out another terrifying roar. Furious, Gaotan yells at it to stay down already. Several undead suddenly latch onto his body, forcing him to shake them off before shouting for Teal and Paul to lure more undead away from him. Teal instinctively jumps backward in fear, prompting Gaotan to call them cowards and threaten to withhold their promotion. Teal nervously replies that they understand, but if they get any closer to the ghoul head, they could easily get caught in the battle and die. They insist they can only support him from the sides. The ghoul head suddenly attempts another ambush by pouncing toward Gaotan, but Gaotan narrowly dodges before activating Rock Shatterer, smashing the monster with tremendous force and dealing massive damage. It looks like the finishing blow is finally within reach, but countless undead continue getting in his way. However, just then, something strange happens. Instead of continuing the fight, the ghoul head begins grabbing nearby undead and shoving them into its mouth. Elemis immediately recognizes the skill as consume corpses, and it is an extremely rare ability that allows a ghoul head to recover health by devouring corpses and undead. However, Elemis quickly notices something unusual. The monster is consuming far more bodies than it should need just to restore its health. As he watches more undead disappear into its mouth, he suddenly realizes what's going on. The ghoul head isn't healing, it's actually evolving. Elemis immediately shouts for Gaotan to stop and get away from the monster, but he is already too late. The ghoul head's body violently mutates before everyone's eyes, its mana surging to an entirely different level. Its size increases dramatically. Its appearance becomes far more grotesque, and its level skyrockets all the way to 40 as it evolves into a mad header. The party is scared at the sight of the evolved ghoul head. Existence evolution is a rare event that occurs only when certain conditions are met, and it primarily refers to monsters awakening latent abilities and transforming into another species to escape sticky situations. Even in Magic World game, the exact conditions for existence evolution weren't clearly stated, but Elemis can only say that they got unlucky. The ghoul head starts charging a green beam in its mouth, and Elemis warns Gaotan not to stand in front of it, but Gaotan doesn't react in time and gets sprayed by the beam. It inflicts a stun effect, leaving him vulnerable to the monster's attacks, and Elemis tells Teal and Paul to distract the ghoul head so it doesn't kill Gaotan, but they ask him what he expects them to do against an evolved ghoul head. It would kill them immediately if they even tried to attack it with magic, but Elemis doesn't care and tells them that if Gaotan dies, all of them will die because none of them are strong enough to face the monster. They need a path to victory, and Gaotan is the only person whose level is close enough to the monster's. But before Elemis can say anything else, the monster punches Gaotan in the abdomen, causing him to vomit blood, and sends him flying several meters across the cemetery. It also inflicts paralysis on him, knocking him unconscious. Paul and Teal hide behind a gravestone, terrified by what just happened to Gaotan. And the monster walks up to him menacingly and winds up its fist to finish him off. But Elemis rushes forward at full speed to get in front of Gaotan and parries the punch that the ghoul head throws at him, though the impact still sends him backward. Elemis tells them that he will draw the ghoul head's attention, and that Teal should cast Heal and Paralysis Heal on Gaotan. But Teal tells him that he has Heal, but doesn't have Paralysis Heal because he spent his skill points increasing his attack. Elemis wonders what kind of half-ass build that is because, back in Magic World game, most people would have gone for a healing-focused build. He tells Teal to take Gaotan somewhere safe and heal him while he distracts the monster, and Teal agrees and hurriedly carries Gaotan away. The monster starts getting impatient and slowly walks toward Elemis. People usually recover from a Mad Header's poison after about 3 minutes, so if Elemis can hold off the ghoul head until then, Gaotan can help him fight it. But Elemis had no idea reality would be so different from the game, and he resolves to fight the evolved ghoul head until Gaotan recovers. The adventurer party thinks that an F-rank adventurer can't fight a monster like that, but one of them doesn't trust Elemis enough to defeat a level 40 monster while he is only level 16, so they decide to book it before he becomes the ghoul head's next meal, and another adventurer tells him to wait for them. Elemis doesn't judge them because they wouldn't last more than 10 seconds if they join the fight, and he can't afford to protect low-rank adventurers while fighting the ghoul head. Teal is so scared of the ghoul head that he is visibly shaking, but Gaotan looks like he is starting to recover. The monster lets out a roar, startling Elemis, but he thinks tactically that since he is level 16 while the Mad Header is level 40, a single mistake means death, yet he still decides to fight. The ghoul head throws a punch, but Elemis manages to evade it, and he decides to rely on strategy since he cannot win in a head-on battle. He makes a break for the grass, and the ghoul head chases after him. But after a short while, it stops and realizes that it can no longer see him. It starts searching frantically, but he remains out of sight. Elemis runs from place to place, using the gravestones as cover, but as he runs past one, the monster happens to hear his footsteps and immediately turns toward the sound. But Elemis manages to escape in time to avoid getting caught. He then throws a stone toward the monster to distract it for a little while, and as the ghoul head turns, he seizes the opportunity and rushes straight at it to cut it down. However, before he could land a hit, the monster reacts and throws a punch at him, forcing him to evade because taking a hit like that head-on would definitely kill him. The monster disappears in less than a second, and now it is Elemis' turn to go looking for it. He starts looking around for the ghoul head, but this time, the monster's ambush works perfectly. and it lands a punch that sends him crashing into a gravestone on the other side of the cemetery. Elemis realizes that the level difference between them is simply too much for him to overcome, and the situation is becoming genuinely dangerous because he realizes he could actually die here. He wanted to avoid situations like this from the very start of the raid, but he never expected to face such a powerful opponent, so he was completely unprepared. It is a high-risk, high-reward situation that is pushing him to his limits, but he has to admit that the high stakes are really getting his blood pumping, and he wouldn't be a man if he gave up now. So he rushes straight at the ghoul head with all the strength he has left, and one of the adventurers is surprised and asks whether the heavy knight is actually managing to hold his own against the ghoul head. But another thinks Elemis is just losing slowly, and it's a miracle he isn't dead yet. Elemis keeps evading the Mad Header's attacks, and he realizes that if he keeps letting it attack freely, it will eventually land a decisive blow. He needs to strike back to keep it in check, so he opens his status window and dumps all of his points into beginner swordsmanship, unlocking a skill called Vital Slice. It allows the user to unleash a powerful slash from point-blank range, making it especially effective against targets with high defense. The ghoul head leaps into the air and punches Elemis, but he parries the attack, slips beneath its leg, and uses Vital Slice on its back. The attack deals very little damage because of the overwhelming level difference. Vital Slice sacrifices the blade's reach, which is why it was considered a defective skill, but its high damage output perfectly complements the low attack, high defense heavy knight. Even so, that alone won't be enough to defeat it. The ghoul head starts throwing punches at Elemis, but he evades every one of them and notices that it's becoming increasingly reckless. The ghoul head gets annoyed and starts punching the ground in frustration, but Elemis tells it that the real fight starts now because his job is done. Gaotan is directly above the ghoul head and unleashes Dragon Slayer Split. Blood gushes out of the monster's eyes, and it lets out one final scream before collapsing dead. The adventurer party celebrates with joy that they managed to live to see another day, but Gaotan looks at Elemis and feels humbled because a mere F rank managed to survive against a monster that nearly killed him. Elemis levels up from level 16 to level 23 but reaches his absolute limit and drops to one knee from exhaustion. He thanks Gaotan for arriving just in time because otherwise he would have died. Gaotan stares at Elemis for a long moment before apologizing to him and admitting that his leadership was inadequate. He had been careless, and Elemis had been right about everything. Elemis is completely dumbfounded that Gaotan is actually apologizing and taking responsibility for his mistakes. Gaotan tells him to take the level 40 magic stone that the boss dropped, and Elemis figures it should be worth quite a lot, so he gladly accepts since he is broke after his cousin from the Branch family took everything he owned. Elemis asks whether he is really okay with it, but Gaotan reassures him that it's only fair since Elemis was the one who defeated the monster. Gaotan takes another look and notices that the ghoul head also dropped an item, and Elemis asks whether he wants it, but Gaotan stands by his decision because he never goes back on his word. Elemis defeated the monster, so the rewards belong to him. Not even a second later, however, Gaotan asks whether Elemis can at least check the item's description, and Elemis gives him a tired look before agreeing. Elemis checks the shield's stats and discovers that it is called the Daemon's Rage Shield and is worth 3 million gold. He reads its abilities and learns that after blocking an attack with the shield, the user's next attack gains an additional 8 attack points. He thinks it's a great item because Rampart Reflection only activates when his armor is struck, but with a shield like this, he could shut down almost any attack around his level before counterattacking. The only problem is that selling something so valuable would be bound to attract a lot of unwanted attention, and attention is the last thing he wants right now. Gaotan gets the look of a greedy-ass man when he hears that it's worth 3 million gold, but the moment Elemis looks at him, he immediately locks in so hard that his head practically shines in the moonlight. Elemis asks Gaotan about his promotion, but Gaotan tells him not to worry because he'll tell the guild that refusing to promote Elemis would be their loss, and they had better do it immediately. He says the guild warned him to make sure Elemis hadn't cheated, but he now realizes that warning was completely misguided, and if anyone objects, he'll knock them out himself. Teal comes over and asks Gaotan whether he can approve his promotion too since it was his heel that got Gaotan back on his feet, but Gaotan yells at Teal because he completely lost his nerve against that monster, so he can't approve it. There will be far greater challenges waiting for him inside dungeons, and he should spend more time taking quests he can actually handle, but even though he's only saying it out of concern, Teal gets upset and storms off. Back at the Adventurers Guild, everyone is chatting when they overhear the receptionist, and they all turn to watch as she pays Elemis 130,000 gold for completing the raid, 200,000 gold for 10 white magic stones, and another 600,000 gold for the ghoul head's evolved Mad Header magic stone. Gaoten laughs that Elymas actually made more money than he did this time, and Elymas says that raids really are one of the fastest ways to make money, but everyone in the guild is shocked that a heavy knight earns so much. The receptionist asks Gaoten whether Elymas really defeated the ghoul head variant. One adventurer says Elymas already raised eyebrows when he brought in high-level magic stones before, while another asks what level he is. Everyone keeps bombarding Gaoten with questions, because they think the idea of a heavy knight defeating a level 40 Mad Hatter is far too unbelievable. But Gaoten slams his hand onto the desk to silence them. He asks how they dare doubt Elymas or insult his judgment for approving the promotion, and the entire guild falls silent as Gaoten glares at everyone with an angry expression. After they finish trading the magic stones and collecting their rewards, Elymas thanks Gaoten for everything he has done for him, and Gaoten appreciates it, so he says they should meet again someday. Thanks to Gaoten stopping everyone from talking behind his back, Elymas has officially been promoted to rank E, and later on, he is wandering through the city thinking about what to do next now that he has reached rank E. At rank E, he can finally enter dungeons and farm gold, but the Rampart Reflection strategy relies on overwhelming defense and only works reliably against beginner enemies. So with his current skill setup, he'll be stuck grinding levels for quite a while. He decides he should start looking for a skill book to determine his future path. The one he wants is the Fang of Smoldering Insanity skill book. Skill books are required to unlock skill trees, but they are incredibly rare, so the chances of finding one are slim. Still, looking costs nothing. Oath of Armor and Fang of Smoldering Insanity are two skill trees complement each other and complete the Heavy Knight class. A completed Heavy Knight is no longer merely a defense specialist, but calling it an offense specialist wouldn't be accurate either. It becomes a human weapon. Fang of Smoldering Insanity is the key to unlocking the Heavy Knight's true potential. Skill books are the items required to unlock skill trees, and they're unbelievably rare, so Elymas knows he isn't going to find one right away. Since getting one through normal means isn't realistic, he decides to settle for the next best option and starts looking for one anyway, because it doesn't cost him anything to search. When Oath of Heavy Armor and Fang of Smoldering Insanity are combined together, they complete the Heavy Knight class and make it completely overpowered. The completed Heavy Knight is no longer just a defense specialist, but even calling it an offensive specialist isn't quite right either. It's basically a human weapon capable of wiping out entire armies on its own. Fang of Smoldering Insanity is the skill tree that's essential for unlocking the Heavy Knight's full potential. As everyone enjoys their lives in the peaceful and joyous city, Elymas walks through the streets looking for an alchemist shop. While he's walking, he can't help thinking about how essential Fang of Smoldering Insanity is to the Heavy Knight class, and he thinks it would be amazing if he somehow found one in this city. After finding the alchemist shop, he takes a look at the potions and asks the shopkeeper for 3 healing potions, but she tells him they'll cost 72,000 gold. Elymas feels the pain in both his soul and his wallet when he hears the price and says they're a lot more expensive than they were in the game, but there isn't any way around it, and he really needs them, so he pays. Before leaving, Elymas asks the shopkeeper where he can buy skill books because he couldn't find any at the other shops he visited. A Heavy Knight is basically stuck in tutorial mode until they obtain the Fang of Smoldering Insanity skill book. The shopkeeper tells him that buying and selling skill books is prohibited. People are allowed to use the skill books they obtain from raids, but other than that, the Adventurers Guild gives almost all of them to the nobles and the church. Elymas is shocked to hear this because skill books are unbelievably rare drops, and it's generally assumed that you'll have to buy them since there's no guarantee a monster will ever drop the exact one you need. He already had a feeling that nobles held more power in this world than they did in the game, but he never imagined it was to this extent. Thinking about it some more, he concludes that it's probably his own family that's hoarding and collecting all the skill books in Rondon. The shopkeeper looks around nervously before telling Elymas that she isn't supposed to say anything, but she'll make an exception since he bought the healing potions. She hands him a map and tells him to head to the marked location. When Elymas asks what it is, she explains that it's a shop dealing in scavenged goods. Scavengers are people who loot the corpses of dead adventurers in the hope of finding valuable items. Elymas asks whether those items aren't supposed to be reported to the Adventurers Guild, but the shopkeeper explains that the guild and the scavengers have an unspoken agreement. The guild knows the underground shops exist but looks the other way because some adventurers would never survive without scavenging, and even if they crack down on it, most of the recovered items would just end up in the hands of greedy nobles instead of the families of the dead. The nobles buy skill books cheaply and hoard them instead of using them, even though they have no idea how difficult it is to survive as an adventurer, and just talking about it clearly infuriates the shopkeeper. Elymas calls himself naive because if the memories of his past life had never returned and he had become a master swordsman instead of a heavy knight, he never would have realized any of this. The shopkeeper reminds Elymas not to tell anyone about the shop, and he agrees. As he makes his way through the city, he slips into an alleyway and eventually finds the place. He hesitates for a moment before deciding to head inside, but the moment he enters, he's greeted by a thick cloud of smoke that makes him cough violently. Covering his mouth, he looks around but doesn't see anything at first, making him wonder whether they actually sell skill books here. However, after taking a second look, he notices several skill books neatly arranged on a shelf. Before he can inspect them, an old lady suddenly comments that he's got some nice armor, startling him. After regaining his composure, Elymas tells her he has gold and would like to look through her skill books. She casually tells him to help himself because his fingerprints won't make them any less valuable. Elymas picks up the first skill book, and the system identifies it as the Beginner Archery Skill Book with a market value of 2 million gold. This is the second time today that Elymas feels his wallet begging him for mercy, because it's 500,000 gold more expensive than it was in the game. Back then, market prices were determined by trades between players, so the prices there were probably based on actual supply and demand. Here, skill books have most likely become ridiculously inflated because the nobles are hoarding nearly all of them. The old lady tells him she'll sell the book for 3 million gold, causing Elymas to break into a cold sweat. She explains that she's taking a massive risk by running this business. The local officials might pretend not to notice, but if their superiors ever find out, she could lose her head. Even if Elymas sold the Daemon's Rage Shield he obtained from the previous raid, he'd only have enough money to buy the Beginner Archery Skill Book, so there's no way he'd be able to afford a rare skill book. After checking through most of the collection, Elymas concludes that none of them are what he's looking for. However, when he reaches the final book, his eyes widen in excitement because it's the one skill tree that's essential for the Heavy Knight class Fang of Smoldering Insanity. The old lady notices how excited he is and comments that he must be an oddball if that's the book he wants, but Elymas pays no attention to the remark and immediately asks for the price. She calmly tells him it'll cost 50 million gold. Elymas can't help being amazed that she'd leave something so valuable sitting out in the open without any visible guards, but the old lady smirks and tells him that if he's so convinced she's just a weak old woman, then he's welcome to test that theory. She casually mentions that she threw 5 men out of the shop just the other day. Realizing intimidation won't work, Elymas switches to plan B and asks whether she'd be willing to reserve the skill book for him. She asks what she'd gain from helping him, but after thinking about it, she decides she doesn't dislike him and agrees to hold onto it for an extra 5 million gold. Elymas thinks she drives a hard bargain, but he doesn't have much choice. If he wants that skill book, he'll need to find a way to make a fortune as quickly as possible. After leaving, Elymas sits down on a nearby crate and reflects on how completely warped the sense of wealth becomes among high-level adventurers and the merchants they deal with. Fang of Smoldering Insanity is only a rare skill tree, and the only people who actually want it are heavy knights and combat junkies with a death wish. If that's already worth 50 million gold, then the truly powerful skill books must cost an absolutely absurd amount. He begins thinking of practical ways to earn money. Farming rare drops from dungeons is one option, but heavy knights don't have the damage output needed to do it efficiently. He considers grinding weak monsters with Rampart Reflection, but that would take far too long. He even thinks about investing in beginner swordsmanship or trying to find Amity skill books so he can build another skill tree for the time being. But it isn't worth wasting skill points on abilities he'll abandon the moment he obtains Fang of Smoldering Insanity. Heavy knights aren't exactly popular, but after his performance in the previous raid, his name has probably spread around a little. Teaming up with other adventurers would give him far more options, and when he remembers all the allies he had during his previous life, he decides it's finally time to build another party. Just then, he overhears a group arguing nearby. The blue-haired girl insists that they only completed the raid because of her skills, but the rest of the party completely ignores her. The swordsman tells her they only got the rare drop because they cleared that dungeon countless times already, so he isn't convinced her abilities had anything to do with it. The girl awkwardly agrees but says that if they keep doing more raids, they'll eventually notice the difference her skills make. The swordsman turns around and asks whether she seriously expects a share of the profits when she's so weak. The girl desperately tries to defend herself by saying she's still risking her life on the front lines, but he immediately points out that she doesn't have any worthwhile attack skills and mostly just stands there soaking up damage. According to him, that's exactly why she's useless. The girl visibly winces after hearing those words, but he continues anyway, bluntly telling her that she contributes nothing to the party. Trembling, she finally gathers enough courage to remind him that she only ended up with this build because she followed his advice when assigning her skill points. She asks whether he doesn't think it's cruel to say all this after they just earned a fortune together. The swordsman replies that reducing everyone's profits for someone who was useless throughout the raid is the real problem. Besides, he only gave her advice. She was the one who actually chose to spend her skill points that way. So now she's blaming him and demanding money despite contributing nothing. Elemis immediately recognizes the situation. It's a terrible build combined with the classic argument over loot distribution, something that happened all the time in the game. You invest your skill points around your current party, but once your circumstances change, all those decisions suddenly become worthless. The swordsman rudely throws a small pouch of coins onto the ground and tells her there's 100,000 gold inside, so she should pick it up and be grateful. He says they kept her around despite how weak she was and the lack of any decent offensive skills, but now she's showing her true colors over what amounts to chump change. Reese adds that it's not like they can afford to split the unexpected windfall they just received. Ruch apologizes, but the swordsman says sorry isn't enough. He kicks her out of the party before sarcastically wishing her luck finding another group, although he doubts anyone will recruit someone whose terrible build has completely ruined their future. The skill point system is absolutely brutal. You have to fight monsters at or above your own level to earn meaningful experience, but if your build is weak enough that you can't handle enemies your own level, then leveling up becomes almost impossible. Elemis wonders whether she wasted her skill points on speed booster or perhaps a weapon skill tree she didn't need. Since she's a Piero, maybe she invested in a support tree instead. As he continues listening, Elemis carefully analyzes the conversation and starts wondering whether she might actually possess a particular skill tree. The longer he thinks about it, the more convinced he becomes that it's exactly the one he's suspecting. If he's right, then she has an incredibly broken skill tree, so he can't understand why anyone would throw someone like her away. Just then, Ruch runs after her former party, desperately begging them to take her back and apologizing for being selfish. But before she can reach them, Elemis steps forward, gently holds her back, and asks her to form a party with him. The party is shocked to hear that Elemis wants to form a party with her, and Elemis tells Ruch that she won't regret forming a party with him. He even offers her a split on all the profits they make, but Ruch misunderstands and tells him that she can't live off 20% forever because it wouldn't be enough to support herself. However, Elemis tells her that she would be the one getting the 80%, and he is okay with 20%. And out of breath, Elemis asks Ruch for her answer, but she is still hung up on the fact that he meant that she would be getting 80% of all the profits. She asks him to let go of her hand first, and he apologizes. The party turns back and asks Elemis what he is trying to do, and Elemis tells them that he overheard Ruch was leaving their party, so he decided to scout her into his own party. Klein tells Elemis that it is a waste for him to recruit Ruch because she has poor combat skills and can't even level up properly, but Elemis tells him that there is no problem with it and he will still recruit her into his party. Ruchi is surprised by what he says, and Klein gets annoyed at Elemis for trying to recruit Ruchi. Klein tells Elemis that he is saving them from guilt if he takes in Ruch, and he should not regret it later. He tells Elemis to take her, but Elemis tells him that he was not asking for his permission in the first place, and it pisses off Klein. Ruchi starts panicking as she sees Klein walking up to Elemis. Klein points his sword at Elemis and asks him what level he is and whether he has any other party members, but Elemis tells him that he is a level 23 E-rank heavy knight, and he does not have any party members. Klein tells Elemis that someone with Elemis' level should know how useless Ruch is. Ruchi tells Elemis that she is only level 13, and it is not a good idea for him to recruit her into his party, but Elemis says that he doesn't care about her level, and it is not a problem for him. Klein gets a bit uneasy hearing Elemis say that he still wants to recruit Ruche after hearing all those bad things about her. Reese calls Klein to have a talk with him, and she tells him that it is a bit strange for an E-rank adventurer to try so desperately to recruit Ruch. She is starting to think that Ruch's skills are a bit more useful than they realize. Elemis wonders whether he looked a bit too desperate, to the point where they are reconsidering taking Ruch back. But Klein says that Ruch's skills didn't do anything throughout the entire raid. Reese tries to make another point, but Klein tells her to keep her mouth shut and let Ruch go since it is better for them if she leaves quietly. Klein tells Reese to think about it. A heavy knight can't reach level 23 on his own, so he is lying to his face, or he was kicked from his party, or he is hitting on a young girl, and Reese agrees. Klein tells Reese that it works in their favor because they do not want a rumor to spread that will let everyone know that they kicked someone out of their party just because they had a bad build. Klein turns back to Elemis and tells him that they were waiting for someone like him the whole time, someone to take Ruch off their hands, and he tells Elemis to take good care of Ruch. Ruche walks up to Elimas and gratefully accepts his kind offer, and she looks forward to working with him, and Elimas returns the formal pleasantry. Elimas is happy that he just gained a new party member after a long time, but Klein starts clapping and congratulates Ruche on finding a new party. Klein tells her that she has never bought herself a decent weapon and kicks the 100,000 gold onto the ground. He tells her that she should think of the gold on the ground as a parting gift from them, and she should use it well. Ruche thanks Klein and goes to pick up the gold on the ground, but Elimas stops her and tells her that she should not pick it up. Elimas tells Klein that he should pick up the gold coins that he threw on the ground since even a child can do it. Elimas tells Klein that he calls the gold a parting gift when he threw it on the ground, and Klein looks at him in anger. Elimas tells Ruche that they should start going, but Ruche almost interrupts his aura by telling him that 100,000 gold is a lot of money. Elimas saves it by telling her that it is best that she does not owe anything to them. Klein yells at him, asking who does he think he is talking to, and says that he should have fun being useless together with their defective classes. Klein tells Reese that they should also leave, but Reese asks him whether she can have the money on the ground. Klein jumps at the money and tells her that she can't have any because it's all his money. At a restaurant, Ruche thanks Elimas for inviting her to join his party, but she still doesn't think that she is strong enough to be in his party. However, Elimas tells her not to worry because if they kill monsters suited to her skill tree, she will level up in no time. But Ruche cuts him off and asks him whether he helped her back then because he fell in love with her at first sight. Elimas asks her what she means, and she tells him that she has been wondering why someone above her level would stand up for her and that it is the only logical reason that she could come up with. She starts fantasizing, saying that Elimas is handsome, but she is not that easy to get, so maybe they can start off as friends. However, Elimas doesn't want to hear any of her nonsense and asks her whether she has the Lady Luck skill tree. In the forest, Elimas and Ruche are walking on a trail looking for a dungeon. In the game world, dungeons are the nightmares of the sleeping god of creation. He created countless gods and worlds from nothing over an eternity, but he, who had remained the absolute god on high throughout that time, lost his mind and was sealed away by the very gods he created. However, his nightmares are beginning to affect reality. His nightmares are creating gates in the real world that produce aberrant monsters and demons. Elimas notices that they have reached the place and tells Ruche that they have arrived. He tells Ruche that what she is looking at is a dungeon, and the system chimes and tells him that the name of the dungeon is Angel's Playbox Entrance, and the recommended level to enter is level 50. Ruche starts getting nervous and asks Elimas whether he is sure he wants someone like her to be in his party, and she shows him her stats. Elimas tells her that she shouldn't be showing people her status window, and Ruche yells in panic and asks him whether he is serious. But she calms down and says that it is fine because she knows that Elimas won't tell anyone. She tells him that she would prefer if he abandoned her now than for her to get his hopes up, then disappoint her later. She can't even use her only attack skill, Dice Thrust, unless she rolls a 6. And she feels stupid because if she had taken Fool's Acrobatic or put points into Attack Booster, then she would have been more useful, and she thinks that she really screwed up. But Elimas tells her that it is fine because he really needs her. Ruche asks him what he means by that, and she tells him that she is not too familiar with that sort of thing, so she needs him to be more direct or she won't understand. Elimas clarifies and tells her that they are going to grind 30 million gold and get her to level 30, but Ruche yells and asks him how they are going to do that. Elimas tells Ruche that they should get into the magic circle, and they are transported into a room with a hallway that looks never-ending. The recommended level for the dungeon is level 50, but Elimas is familiar with the monsters that spawn there, so they won't encounter any serious danger. Elimas and Ruche start walking down the hallway, and Elimas says that they are only going to grind levels on the upper floors. He tells Ruche that he will draw the enemies to him, so she should use the Iron Piercer knife to defeat them. Ruche says that she has made the decision to come this far. Elimas even bought the knife for her, which is worth 550,000 gold coins, so she can't wimp out now. The knife is effective against tough opponents. When damage is applied, it reduces the target's defense by 15% before calculating the damage dealt to the enemy. Ruche tells Elimas that he can count on her, and she will do what she can to live up to his inexplicable confidence and expectations. She says she will do all she can to protect him to repay him for buying her the knife, but Elimas says that it is his job to protect her. Elimas and Ruche hear a sound coming from down the hall and face its direction. They see the silhouette of a bear, and Elimas identifies it as a patchwork bear. Ruche says that the bear looks cute, but the level is horrifying. Elimas says that it has an attack of 22, and even if Ruche gets hit somehow, she will survive, but she can't take a critical hit. Elimas can shut down the bear by throwing it off balance as it begins to attack, but then Ruche asks him how he knows all of that and thinks that he likes patchwork bears. Elemis tells her that he will handle its attacks and tells her to attack its blind spots, but she should watch out for its claws. Elemis uses a skill called Shadow Stomp. He got the skill using the skill points he gained from fighting the Mad Hatter, and he will use it to help Rooch level up. Rooch runs to the side of the bear, and Elemis warns her that shadows can stretch farther than she thinks they can, so she should be careful. Rooch is about to attack the bear when she notices that Elemis told her to watch out for the bear's fangs and claws, but she doesn't see the bear with either. The next second, the bear brings out its claws and starts moving like a cursed object. The stitches rip open and produce a mouth, and Rushi is disgusted by it. The bear rushes at Elemis, but Elemis parries it twice and does a flip on his sword to pin the bear down. Elemis is glad that he has the shield, because surviving attacks without moving his feet is a pain. He calls Roosh to start hitting the bear, and Roosh rushes over to him to start hitting the bear. Once she kills the bear, she starts searching frantically to check whether the bear dropped something. But when she sees that it dropped nothing, she starts crying because she thinks that Elemis is going to kick her out of the party. Elemis tells her not to worry because they only killed it for EXP, and he plans to kill more so that something will drop eventually. But as he says that, another bear appears around the corner, and Elemis tells her they are going to follow the same plan. After they kill a few more bears, Rooch is overjoyed to find out that 2 bears dropped an item in a row. But Elemis thinks that it is odd because those items don't usually drop one after another, and he wonders whether he misremembered the drop rate. Rooch's Cat Paw is a special skill that increases her luck by 500%. If Rooch's starting luck stat was high to begin with, then what happened there wouldn't be impossible. But then he remembers what Klein had said earlier and wonders how Klein's party didn't realize how much she improved their drop rate. He thinks that he probably didn't realize because it was a newbie party. In their world, there isn't much information on monsters, so they must have gotten used to high drop rates from the start. Ruche asks Elemis whether she was useful, and Elemis agrees and thanks her for teaming up with him. Ruche asks whether he wanted the bear shields badly and asks him whether they should collect 10, but Elemis tells her no, that she has gained enough levels and the real work is about to start. Ruche checks her stats and sees that she has leveled up to level 20 and wonders when it happened, but Elemis tells her that they are no longer going to be hunting bears anymore. Now they are going to be hunting the Golden Rana. Rana were the frog monsters that Elemis fought when he first started his adventures. In the game called Magic World, they were seen as trash mobs, the weak enemies that everyone fought early on. There were many kinds of Rana, but only one of them mattered to Elemis right now, and that was the Golden Rana, because it was worth a great deal of money. Given the money troubles they were facing, Elemis had decided that the group needed to farm that dungeon next. The golden version of the Rana had a very low chance of appearing, but when it did show up, it had a chance of dropping something extremely valuable. Its attack power and magic were both very weak, even though its level was high, and it had no attacking skills at all. This meant that fighting it should be simple, since it offered a lot of experience and good rewards while barely being able to fight back. There were several bonus monsters like this one scattered through the game, and among players, the Golden Rana was known by a nickname, the Golden Toad, because its defense was so low compared to how much it dropped. Many players said that hunting golden toads was one of the most fun parts of playing the game. They tended to appear often in the middle levels of a dungeon called the Angel's Play Box, and Elemis already knew the best spots to search for every creature that lived there. Rooch ran ahead of Elemis and stopped him. She told him that she had also heard about the Golden Toad, and that catching just one of its drops could support them for years. She added that other adventurers at the bar had warned that the Golden Toad was far too quick to catch. Even if someone landed a lucky hit, it looked like the toad barely felt any damage at all. She said it was common for people to chase the toad too far, only to end up surrounded by other monsters afterward. Growing nervous, she told Elemis that some people might have even died while chasing it. Elemis admitted she was right, and explained that this world worked in a similar way to the game, but with one important difference. Here there were no extra lives. If someone died once, that was the end for good. Because of this, most people chose to build their characters around staying alive rather than dealing damage. Farming the Golden Toad would not be easy, since it had outstanding defense and speed, which made it very hard to hit or catch. On top of that, it was completely immune to elemental attacks, status effects, and any kind of debuff. Rooch asked whether they even had a real chance against it. She pointed out that even though the iron-piercing knife Elemis had given her earlier worked well against enemies with high defense, she doubted it could do anything to the Golden Toad. She also did not think she was fast enough to catch it if it decided to run. Elemis agreed with her concerns, then explained the numbers. The Golden Toad had a speed stat of 67 and a defense stat of 200. The knife's 15% defense penetration would barely matter against a defense that high. Its speed was more than double Ruche's, even though she played a fast class called a Piero, and more than tripled his own speed as a slow, heavily armored knight. With 200 defense, even a perfectly used skill like Rampart Reflection would be cancelled out, and Vital Slice, which also had 15% penetration, would not be able to do enough damage either. Rushi asked again if the whole plan was even possible. Elemis told her not to worry, because he already had an idea for how to farm them. He said that even something that looked like it had perfect defense still had weaknesses that could be used against it. Ruchi was surprised that he already knew this. She then asked if he had any skill that could actually hurt the Golden Toad, since she had never heard of a heavy knight having any strong damage skills. Elemis smiled and told her that he was counting on her, not himself, to be the one who dealt the damage. Ruchi was shocked to hear that the plan depended on her. Elemis reminded her that she should have earned about 8 skill points from leveling up after their fight with the bears earlier. He told her to put every one of those points into a skill line called Fool's Acrobatics, since the 2 skills she would unlock there were going to be the key to their whole plan. Ruchi said she appreciated that he believed in her so much, but she still doubted she had the kind of power needed to take down something like the Golden Toad. While they were walking and talking, Elemis suddenly noticed a box on the ground and stopped. The box jumped toward them, startling them both, but they managed to dodge it just in time. The box bounced off a nearby wall, and an ogre lunged out from inside it, trying to bite Elemis. He blocked the attack with his shield. After blocking it, he told Ruch they should run while they still could. She said she thought she could finish it off herself, but Elemis explained that this monster was not their goal, and if it felt cornered, it would call other monsters nearby to help it. As they ran off, Ruch asked if it really made sense to focus only on the Golden Toad, since with Elemis' steady support she felt she could gain 2 or 3 more levels doing easier fights. Elimus told her it was fine, because their current levels were actually perfect for taking on the Golden Toad. Once the ogre stopped chasing them, Elemis said he had already expected they would not find a Golden Toad right away. Even searching all day, they would probably only come across 2 of them at most. No matter how lucky Ruch was, the toad was still extremely rare to run into, so he told her to speak up if she started feeling anxious or unhappy about the plan. Ruchi told him not to worry, since she was only a little nervous, and that she would follow him no matter what. Elemis thanked her, but reminded her that she did not need to hold herself back on his account. She said that once they succeeded, she wanted to hunt 100, maybe even 1,000 of them, just to prove to him that she could really do it. Elemis laughed and said he appreciated her drive, but if they actually farmed that many, the market in their hometown of Rondalm would probably collapse. Just then, Ruchi noticed something shining out of the corner of her eye and asked if it might be the Golden Toad they had been searching for all this time. Elemis looked over and was stunned that they had already found one so soon. He told her to stay calm if they wanted any chance of beating it, but Ruchi was so excited that she seemed to be holding her breath without realizing it. Elemis asked if she had reached level 10 and gained the 2 skills from Fool's Acrobatics like he had told her to. She confirmed that she had. He decided to wait where he was, and told her to lure the toad toward him. Ruch felt tense knowing how valuable the creature was, so Elemis tried to calm her down, telling her it would be fine even if she made a mistake, and reminding her to take a deep breath first. She steadied herself and grew determined, and Elemis looked proud watching her prepare. Golden toads would start fleeing the moment an adventurer came within 4 meters of them, and the corridors inside the Angel's Play box happened to be exactly 4 meters wide. Even standing at the very edge of a hallway, there was no way to slip past one without being noticed, at least not while walking normally on the ground. To get around this, Ruch used her first new skill, Acrobatic Amble, to run along the walls instead, staying out of the toad's notice. Once she landed in front of it, the toad spotted her and tried to dash past, but she used her second skill, called Doppillusion, to fill the narrow hallway with illusions. In a space that tight, there was no way for the toad to slip through them, and being the cowardly type, it refused to charge straight into the illusions, choosing instead to look for another way out. Even though its immunity meant it could not be blinded or made to hallucinate directly, it still could not see through illusions created this way, which turned out to be one of the few gaps in its otherwise strong defenses. Ruchis saw the toad turn and dart the other way, and she called out to warn Elemis that it was now heading straight toward him. Elemis knew he had a skill called Shadow Stomp that could work here, but landing it would depend entirely on timing, since the toad moved 3 times faster than he did even in the narrow corridor. His own shadow only stretched about 50 centimeters, which made things harder, but he told himself he could not afford to fail, since this whole plan had been his idea. He pulled out a magic stone from his bag, one he had originally bought alongside Ruche's knife, though its healing effect was too weak to be very useful for that purpose. He threw the stone down in front of the toad, and it lit up brightly, casting a long shadow from the creature across the floor. Elemis used that moment to step directly onto the toad's shadow, pinning it in place. Ruch was relieved that he had managed to catch it and hurried over, asking how they were supposed to actually kill it now. He explained that everything depended on landing a critical hit, which required reading the enemy's movements perfectly. A critical hit dealt 1.5 times normal damage and ignored 50% of the target's defense. Ruchi pointed out that he now had all the time he needed to try for one, but Elemis admitted that even his own critical hits would not do enough damage to matter against a defense as high as the toad's. Landing a critical hit took both skill and luck, and with his current stats, it would not be enough even if he pulled it off. Ruchi mentioned that she had only ever managed a handful of critical hits herself, but Elemis told her that trying normally would be pointless anyway, since she had something better, an original skill of her own called Dice Thrust. When she used it, she rolled a 6-sided die, and whatever number came up granted her a special bonus tied to that roll. Ruchi realized that rolling a 6 specifically would guarantee a critical hit outright, since a 6 multiplied her attack by 1.3 on top of the guaranteed critical. Combined with her other buffs, the total multiplier came out to 1.95, and stacking that with the knife's 15% penetration and the critical hit's own 50% penetration meant she might finally have enough force to break through the toad's defense. Elemis told her that some character classes might seem weaker or slower to grow, but there was no such thing as a truly useless class. He told her not to let anyone's comments get to her, even if her class had seemed unimpressive to other players before. Hearing this, Ruchi felt a surge of determination and told him she would not let him down, since being trusted with something this important was exactly why she had become an adventurer in the first place. She rushed toward the pinned toad and activated Dice Thrust. The die landed on 6, and her attack struck true as a critical hit. Both Ruchi and Elemis leveled up from the kill, and they were overjoyed to have finally taken down the golden toad together. Elemis reminded her that the best part was still ahead. The item drop, though it only had a 50% chance of appearing at all. Ruchi walked over to check, and both of them were thrilled to see that the toad had dropped a sword. Ruch says she is surprised that they got an item worth 1.7 million gold. Elemis corrects her, and says she missed a zero. The sword is really worth 17 million gold. Ruch almost faints when she checks the price for herself. She tells Elemis that her old party once kicked her out over her share of a 2 million gold item, and even now she can hardly believe they got something worth so much money so easily. She thinks it is strange for her to say that, since Elemis was the one who set everything up from the start. Then Ruch realizes that carrying something this valuable will make them a big target for other people. She tells Elemis they need to run and hide somewhere safe right away. Elemis completely misunderstands what she means. He thinks she is only saying they should keep moving so they can hunt more toads. 3 hours later, Ruch is trying to kill a toad using a move called Dice Thrust. Her luck is bad for a while, and she keeps missing. But she finally rolls a 6 and lands a critical hit, killing the toad in one blow. It drops another sword. Elemis is happy about the drop, but then he sees Ruch fall to the floor. He thinks she is upset because she missed so many attacks in a row, so he tries to comfort her. He tells her that even though she missed a few times, she is probably just saving her luck for later. But that is not why Ruch fell. She fell because they have now made 34 million gold in a single day, and the number is too much for her to process. Right before she faints completely, the system chimes and tells her she has leveled up to level 31. Elemis rushes over and tries to catch her before she hits the ground. Ruch is still stuck on the fact that they made so much money in one day. Elemis tells her it is thanks to her that they managed to get both swords at all. He says they will need to think carefully about how to use the money for their party going forward. Ruch agrees, since they have to plan for the future now, but it still does not feel real to her. Elemis then says they also need to decide how to spend their skill points, based on what gear and abilities they already have. Ruch remembers she still has a large pile of unused skill points saved up from leveling up so quickly. She asks him how she should spend them, and without meaning to, she accidentally shows him her status window. Elemis tells her she should be more careful, and should not show her status window to other people so easily. Ruchi tells him there is no need to worry about that anymore. She feels she owes him for helping her reach this level, and she says she would not mind if he used her up and threw her away like an old rag once she was no longer useful. Elemis is clearly uncomfortable hearing her talk about herself this way. He wishes she actually cared more about her own life. Then Ruchi hears a strange sound and turns toward it, alert. She asks Elemis if he just heard the sound of a baby crying somewhere nearby. Elemis tries to think if anything in this dungeon makes a sound like that, and he slowly realizes it might be the boss moving around somewhere close. A dungeon boss, also called a Dream Lord, is the heart of the dungeon itself. Normally it stays deep inside its chamber, and does not move at all. But sometimes it wanders through the rest of the dungeon, and this is known simply as wandering. Roosh gets scared and asks if the Dream Lord's recommended level is 50, and whether that means very bad news for them. Elymas tries to comfort her and says they will be fine as long as they make the right choices from here. They decide to move away from the sound and head straight toward the exit, since the Dream Lord cannot follow them out of the dungeon once they leave. That is usually where an adventure like this one would safely end. But then Elymas and Ruche spot two badly injured people begging for help in the distance. A much stronger monster has suddenly appeared and is chasing them down. Elymas immediately knows this is not like the game he remembers, and in their current wounded state, these two people have no real way to escape on their own. If Elymas and Roosh simply run past them, the injured pair will certainly die. Elymas decides right then to protect them. He tells Roosh to get the injured people out of the dungeon while he stays behind to keep the monster busy. Roosh warns him that this is far too dangerous, since even he cannot handle a level 50 Dream Lord alone. Elymas tells her he understands the true nature of the Dream Lord better than she thinks, and he insists she take the injured people and escape without him. He says it is the duty of a heavy knight to draw dangerous enemies away from the people who cannot fight. As Roosh and the injured people listen, they hear the monster drawing closer and grow even more afraid. A tall, cylinder-shaped puppet steps out of the shadows, a sword attached directly to its arm, covered from head to blade in blood. Elymas tells Ruche he will buy them enough time to escape, and tells her again, firmly, to take the injured pair and get out of the dungeon safely. The injured people thank him quietly for the chance to survive. Ruche checks the stats of this creature, called a Tin Knight, and Elymas notes that it already looks damaged, meaning things could be even worse than they currently appear. Ruche points out that even though it is clearly powerful, it is already weakened, and she thinks they should fight it together as a team. Elymas refuses firmly and tells her to run, explaining that this Tin Knight is not the Dream Lord itself. It is only one of the Dream Lord's minions, and the real Dream Lord will be arriving soon. Roosh is horrified to see two more Tin Knights join the fight, each one around level 40. She feels there is no possible way they can win against so many enemies at once. Elymas tells her calmly that he will be right behind her once he buys her enough time to get away safely. Ruche argues against leaving him behind to fight alone, since there is a very real chance he could die here, and she reminds him that she was the one who convinced him to bring her into his party in the first place. Elymas snaps at her sharply and says he cannot protect dead weight while fighting off all these Tin Knights at once, and that she would only get in his way if she stayed. Ruche is deeply hurt by his words. She quietly apologizes for being dead weight and tells him not to take too long getting out of the dungeon himself. As she finally leaves with the injured pair, Elymas starts thinking hard about his situation. He knows that if Roosh had stayed behind, the two of them together might have been able to take down all the Tin Knights. But then the Dream Lord would have attacked them both directly, and neither of them would have survived that. He had told Roosh that he would pull all the enemies toward himself and then flee afterward, but that was a complete lie. As a heavy knight, he has almost no speed at all. He might be able to outrun the Tin Knights eventually, but there is simply no way he can outrun a Dream Lord that can use magic attacks from a distance. Elymas resolves right there to defeat the Dream Lord and all of its minions on his own. Soon after, the Dream Lord finally catches up to its minions in the corridor. Elymas studies its stats carefully and thinks its numbers are surprisingly low for a level 50 monster. The real problem, though, is that he cannot damage its body at all, since its flesh defense is unbelievably high. Only its eyes can actually be hurt, and hitting them requires ranged attacks, which he is not well equipped for. Elymas reasons that if a monster has one clear weakness like this, then even a low-level solo adventurer still has a real chance to beat it. He puts every available point into his heavy armor skill tree without hesitation. The system announces that his Oath of Heavy Armor skill has reached level 27, and he has unlocked a brand new skill called Shield Bash. He smiles the moment he hears this. He shouts at the Dream Lord, telling it plainly that he will not run away, and that he will face it head-on no matter what happens. One of the Tin Knights charges straight at Elymas, and he uses Shield Bash to send it flying hard into a nearby wall. He feels relieved to finally have a skill that can scatter his enemies apart like this. Another Tin Knight tries to strike him from the side a moment later, but he parries at exactly the right moment and knocks the weapon clean out of its hand. Elymas figures the Dream Lord will not use either of its two magic attacks, called Sylph Cutter and Thunderstorm, while its own Tin Knights are still standing this close to him, since the attacks would hit them too. This means he can safely focus all his attention on the Tin Knights for now. He blocks one attack, then rushes at another knight and performs a clean slide before disarming it as well. He quietly calculates that it has been 47 seconds since he last used Disarm, meaning the skill's cooldown has fully passed and he can use it again right now. A Tin Knight charges him once more, and this time he uses a skill called Rampart Reflection to block the attack completely and send the damage right back at it. The Dream Lord's eye suddenly begins glowing green, and it uses a skill called Repair to restore all the Tin Knights back to full strength at once. Elemis realizes with dread that the Tin Knights will keep coming back endlessly unless he kills the Dream Lord itself first. But he also notices something useful, that the Dream Lord exposes its eye every single time it uses magic. He throws an Earth Magic Stone straight at the eye, and its health instantly drops to 32%. He decides to use the Tin Knights themselves as living shields against the Dream Lord's Sylph Cutter attack, figuring that as long as he does not make a careless mistake, he will not be killed in one single hit. He tries to use Shield Bash on one of the Tin Knights again, but this time it stops short and jumps away before his shield can even reach it. Elemis is genuinely shocked that it managed to dodge his attack like that, but he has no time to think it over, since two more Tin Knights are already closing in fast behind him. He blocks one strike and uses a skill called Vita Slice on the other. He starts to notice that the enemies seem to be learning the patterns of his attacks as the fight goes on. In the game this world is based on, monsters were never able to adapt to a player's skills this way. He figures this kind of learning should not be too surprising in a real world, but it makes beating the Dream Lord far harder than he originally expected. He still needs to land 3 more magic stones on its eye to kill it for good, but Dream Lords heal very quickly, and if this fight drags on too long, he knows he will be in serious trouble. He notices the Dream Lord charging up a powerful attack and thinks it is a strange choice, since the current positioning of its own Tin Knights means the attack will hit them too. But the Dream Lord does not seem to care at all, and it uses the skill anyway without hesitation. Elemis realizes there is no way to dodge it in time, so he braces himself and tries to take the hit head-on. He puts everything he has left into defending himself, but the force still throws him backward hard, and his vision starts to fade at the edges. Pain spreads through his entire body all at once, and he is hit with a stun effect that locks him in place. He knows that being stunned right now could easily be fatal, and he thinks bitterly to himself that his luck was bad from the very beginning. As one of the Tin Knights raises its sword to finish him off for good, Elemis thinks he should have told Ruch to stay with him after all, no matter what he had said earlier. But just as the blade is about to land on him, Ruch suddenly appears out of nowhere and saves him from certain death. Elemis is completely stunned to see her standing there in front of him. This was the end of episode 8. Subscribe to not miss the next part.